In 1979, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat signed a peace treaty with the State of Israel.
Let there be no more wars or bloodshed.
He was walking away from the Palestinians. He was opting for a separate peace.
He had broken the rules. He had gone to a forbidden land.
Let there be no more suffering or denial of rights.
Many people in the Arab world thought this was a stab in the back.
He had political courage. He knew that he was taking a very heavy chance.
He even expected that he might be killed for it.
Anwar Sadat, now on Biography. It was high drama and higher risk. Egyptian President Anwar Sadat had just landed at Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv, Israel. In the 3 decades since the United Nations created the Jewish state, Egypt and Israel had fought 5 wars. No Arab leader had ever dared set foot on Israeli soil or speak publicly to an Israeli official.
This was a whole sea change in the history of the Middle East. Here they were shaking hands. They were patting each other on the back. Golda Meir, who had recently been head of the Israeli state, she said, "Why didn't you tell me you wanted to come to Israel?"
The date was November 19th, 1977. After years of bloodshed and third-party negotiations, Anwar Sadat had come to Israel in person to talk peace.
What I really, at heart, want from this visit, that the wall of that was created between us and the Israelis because of the psychological problems comes down.
Sadat called his trip a sacred mission. Syrian radio called it the blackest day in Arab history. Either way, it was the sort of courageous political gesture offered at great personal and political peril that became the hallmark of Sadat's presidency.
When he went to Jerusalem, his foreign minister refused to go. Several others refused to go. They were afraid if they agreed to go that they would be assassinated.
He had broken the rules. He had gone to a forbidden land, and he had done it without consulting his people.
Many people in the Arab world thought this was a stab in the back by the most powerful Arab nation. They felt that Sadat had sold out.
Sadat had come to Israel to negotiate 2 long-standing issues: Israeli withdrawal from occupied Arab territories and the creation of an independent Palestinian state. After decades of on-again, off-again talks, Sadat's peace initiative unfolded at lightning speed. It had begun just 9 days earlier, when, departing from his prepared speech, Sadat told the Egyptian parliament he would be willing to go anywhere, even to the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, to discuss peace. 4 days later, he repeated the offer to CBS News anchor Walter Cronkite.
I said, "When are you going to Israel?" And he said, "I am going just as soon as there is peace." And I said, well, that is your condition before you would go to Israel. No, Walter. He said, "I have no conditions."
The only condition is that I want to discuss the whole situation with the 120 members of the Knesset.
Media savvy and master of the dramatic political gesture, Sadat knew his words would grab headlines worldwide.
He was a showman, and he realized in the minds of the rest of the world he was also a superstar. And so he played that card constantly, and he toyed with the foreign press especially, whom he knew would respond to his theatrical gestures.
Sadat was a visionary.
He was a very broad thinker. He could think in terms of the strategy for Egypt for the next 30 years, which is unusual in a statesman.
And he was a high-stakes gambler.
I admire most of all in a politician courage, and there are not many who can claim it. He had political courage.
He understood that what he was doing was risky. He even expected that he might be killed for it.
Sadat's trip took him into a minefield of issues, any one of which could have detonated, destroying the peace initiative. Negotiations were frequently deadlocked, but Sadat hung in there.
He had a strong conviction, and that conviction came from a sense of faith that what he was doing was the right thing.
After 2 years of grueling negotiations, Sadat flew to Washington to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin and President Jimmy Carter. There, in front of the White House, the two former enemies signed the first peace treaty between Israel and an Arab state.
Let there be no more wars or bloodshed between Arabs and Israelis. Let there be no more suffering or denial of rights.
Though applauded in the West, Sadat's actions were condemned throughout the Arab world, setting in motion events that would cost him his life. Anwar Sadat's journey toward the historic 1979 peace treaty with Israel began 6 years earlier in Egypt's Sinai Desert. The Israelis had occupied the Sinai since 1967, when their surprise attack routed the Egyptian army. After such a humiliating loss, no one expected Sadat would dare go to war over the Sinai. But he did. This time, the vaunted Israeli army was caught unaware and suffered severe losses. By the time a ceasefire was finally organized, the Israelis had regained the upper hand. Nevertheless, the war was hailed throughout the Arab world as a brilliant victory. Sadat's high-stakes gamble shattered the myth of Israeli invincibility, opening the way to an eventual Israeli-Egyptian peace agreement.
The October War gave Egypt back its manhood. Right? Quite right. Quite right.
As president, Sadat took enormous risks to achieve peace. The courage to go his own way, he said, grew from years of adversity, beginning with his impoverished childhood in the village of Miet Abul Kam.
Life is hard, but really what is rewarding in this is that the principles and the morale in the village is something very superior, really superior.
Sadat was born in Miet Abul Kam on Christmas Day, 1918. His father was a poor military hospital clerk, his mother an illiterate Sudanese. Sadat had 12 brothers and sisters. As a young man, Sadat dreamed of being an actor. But in 1936, Egypt's upper-class-only military academy was open to all citizens, and his father managed to win him an appointment.
Well, Sadat would have been a peasant. I mean, the army was the instrument of mobility. So this was the way out of poverty and the way into politics.
At the academy, Sadat befriended Jamal Abdel Nasser, the future president of Egypt.
That class of young boys who went into the academy in 1936 changed Egyptian history forever and was a break with centuries and centuries of Egyptian life when the Egyptians were always ruled by foreigners.
When Sadat grew up, it was the British who ruled Egypt. Like many of his generation, he saw them as oppressors. As a child, his hero had been Ataturk, a Turkish revolutionary who overthrew the Ottoman Empire. The young Sadat dreamed of doing the same to the British. He began pursuing that dream after graduating from the military academy, when he joined the secret Free Officers Group formed by Nasser. Their goal was to overthrow Egypt's King Farouk, whom they saw as a British lackey, and kick the British out.
Men like Sadat felt this sense of exclusion, and their whole life was about nationalism. It was about retrieving Egypt for the Egyptians. And that's where Sadat and Nasser, that's what their historic role is about.
During World War II, Sadat and other officers tried to form a secret alliance with German troops fighting the British in North Africa. They hoped to provide intelligence on British troop movements, but their plot was discovered and Sadat was thrown in jail.